What is going on, everyone? This is Drew Code Sports Talk, and I am your host, Andrew Wright. Yes, I am in my car, and was just thinking while I was in my car, I was thinking about Derek Carr's retirement. You see how I did that? Anyway, so I wanted to give my thoughts because I thought maybe I'd be able to um, go on to the episode with Cody that he recorded Tuesday night. This is Wednesday morning, and unfortunately, I wasn't. And so I wanted to come on here and just kind of give my thoughts because I feel like a lot of people maybe not truly understand why we were, such huge Derek Carr fans. Maybe not truly understand why or like what he means to the Raider organization, the Fresno area. Um, and so I just wanted to come on here and give my legitimate thoughts because, I feel like I owe it to Derek Carr, and I know people are going to come on here and be like, you owe it, like he knows you. No, he doesn't know me. But we have talked about and we have had his back, Cody and I, throughout the years, throughout the Raider years. And um, it would be weird for us to like ignore the fact that he ended up retiring. And maybe this is under everyone's radar. Maybe no one most people who are listening to this, maybe like, okay, well, whatever, who cares? But that's why it means something to us. It meant something to us, and so that's why I wanted to come on here and give my thoughts. So, I wanted to start off by saying, first of all, congratulations to Derek Carr for being able to be that strong and just say like, man, I'm done. Like I can't do it. Um, I don't think people really truly understand how hard that is to do. That's extremely hard to do. He's only played 11 years, and he's saying, I got this injury, I'm done. Like I don't think you understand how truly difficult it is to retire when you've been really good in your career and you arguably can still play. Um, and so I think a lot of people don't fully understand that's a difficult decision that they had to make or that he had to make. His family had to make. And, he ultimately said it's not worth it. And I praise him for that because that is really difficult to admit to yourself, to other people, um, and to a whole NFL fan base, a whole that's very difficult. So, congratulations to him on retiring, and it seems like he's having fun. I think he's gone golfing maybe 2-3 times already, which is like fantastic. I would love to do that. Um, I was getting the itch to go golfing, this weekend, and I probably won't be able to. But shoot, I mean, I understand. I understand the itch. I understand the feeling. So, yeah, let's go into Derek Carr. So the reason, and I'm going to go into why he means so much to the Fresno area. This kid came into all of our lives when he was about 11, 12 years old. And he's being interviewed by a friend of mine named Paul Leffler, who is the voice of the Bulldogs now. And he was at a news station at the time. And so he asked he asked Derek about David Carr's Heisman Trophy run. And he goes, how does it make you feel? And I'm not going to be quoting it perfectly, but basically he says, how does it make you feel that, a lot of people are looking at your brother saying that he's not Heisman material. And basically Derek Carr, in a nutshell, at 11, 12 years old, politically incorrect, saying, well, people don't know football, so I don't listen to them. And I remember watching that going, man, I hope I get to, um, I hope I get to be, I get to answer questions like that when I'm, maybe not his age, but at least, when I get older. Like, I would love to have an interview. And I just remember watching him and going, man, that he's gonna be a good player. He's gonna be a good player for sure. Like the confidence that he exuded, uh, just in that interview. And I remember I was like, I'm gonna remember him because when he's playing in high school, I'm gonna keep an eye on him. And sure enough, he's playing in high school. He goes to Bakersfield Christian High School, and they were not always like the best, but they're always usually pretty good of a football team. And I remember the number 4 on his back, and he's throwing amazing. I mean, this kid is throwing darts everywhere. I mean, absolute dimes everywhere in high school. And so I look at that and I go, man, this guy, he's going to be playing on Saturdays. Like 100% he's playing on Saturdays. There's no question about it. The only question is where. Where is he throwing it? And so that's kind of what it was for 2 years. I remember watching him his junior year. That's where I first watched him, and I would go on ABC 30, a local news channel, and on Friday nights and watch all the highlights of all the high school games and who won, who lost. And I remember just starting to kind of get into that type of stuff, like that in-depth stuff. And so I would watch, Bakersfield Christian High School. I would watch if they won or lost, every single Friday until his senior year when he finally ended up graduating. And so during that time, I remember hearing that USC was really actively trying to get Derek Carr to come over to play for them, for the Trojans. And I remember I was like, "Oh, he's going to go to USC. Why wouldn't you? Fresno State. Yeah, your brother played here, but you know, it actually might be easier legacy wise because if you don't if you don't show how good you were or how good you are, like David was, are people going to view that as a not unsuccessful career? And so that's a lot of pressure. So as much as you're probably looking at me going and laughing and going, USC is less pressure than Fresno State, but I don't think you fully understand the impact that David Carr had. David brought, Fresno State always had some really good quarterbacks. I mean, we had Trent Dilfers, Billy Volix, Jim Sweeney. I know I'm missing a ton of quarterbacks right now, but those are the names that come to mind. And so we produced some good quarterbacks, but the quarterback that really brought us out to the national news, the national sports teams, all these big college teams going, okay, maybe we should play Fresno State. And then it became a known thing of maybe we shouldn't play Fresno State because they come to play every single week. David Carr brought that. I mean, David was the beginner of all of that for Fresno State. And so the impact that he made, you bring Derek Carr into that, and that's a difficult thing to achieve in it, like, or at least be equal to. And so, do I do I think that Derek Carr um, was going to be unsuccessful? No, I thought he was going to be good, but I can understand a kid looking at it going, I don't know if I'm going to be able, everyone's always going to compare me to my brother. Can I live up to that expectation? And I understand that. So, whereas he goes to USC, the expectation is that he can just play. And if he can play, then great. And if he can't, then, he, bye bye career. So it was a very tough situation, I believe, for Derek Carr. And I didn't know this story at the time, but there's a story out there. I believe it's on ESPN about Derek Carr when he was trying to get recruited by Fresno State. And one thing that his whole family said is Derek wanted to go to Fresno State, period. He wanted to go to Fresno State, but he hadn't heard from Fresno State. He hadn't heard from Coach Pat Hill, who also coached his brother David. And so Derek went to, excuse me, there was a phone call to Derek's father. And the dad answers the phone, and it's Coach Pat Hill. And he says, "Hey, I'm checking on David, see how he's doing. How's everything going?" And the dad goes, "Hey, Derek's been waiting for your phone call. He's been waiting. Like he wants to hear from you." And he goes, Coach Hill said, "Is he by you?" The dad said, "Yeah." And Coach Hill said, "Put him on." So he goes on the phone, and the first thing that Derek says is, "Coach, when are you recruiting me? Are you going to recruit me?" And he goes, "Heck yeah, we're going to recruit you." He goes, "I think we're going to try and offer you a full ride scholarship." And so he gets off the phone, and Derek looks to his dad and says, where his dad asks Derek, he says, "What did Coach Hill say?" And Derek says, "I'm going to Fresno State." And the impact of that decision here in Fresno was huge. Derek could have gone to a big powerhouse, a 5-star school, and he went to, some might say, a 2-star, maybe even a 3-star school, but he could have gone to a big name with better competition. Could have showed off what he could do, and he would have been successful. Absolutely would have been successful. But he came to Fresno State, and so Fresno was put on the map again by a Carr. And so Derek just started breaking his brother's records. I mean, left and right. The years with Davante Adams, and it's funny is during this time, during the Derek Carr era, Paul George was there, Aaron Judge was there, Taylor Ward was there, um, um, Davante Adams, of course, as well. So there was a lot of talent at Fresno State, and Derek brought the spotlight to all of them. And so Derek, was killing it. And I remember sitting at home watching the NFL draft, and I knew that the Raiders were going to go after Khalil Mack. That was going to be the first round pick. And I just remember sitting there going, man, I really, really hope, I pray that the Raiders get Derek Carr. And I thought Derek was better than Blake Bortles. Again, you can call it bias. That's fine. I actually legitimately think that Blake Bortles was not better than Derek Carr at that time, and now we know for sure that was correct. But I really believe that Derek Carr should be a Raider. It just seemed right. And he had mentioned before that he grew up a Raider fan, so he would actually be into that. And so I just remember sitting there going, this would be a great fit. So I knew this was a perfect fit. I knew this was what needed to happen for the Raiders. But at that time, Derek Carr was a borderline first round quarterback. So we were unsure that he was going to be available for the Raiders at that point. And so I just remember sweating out that whole first round, realizing pick by pick, Derek's going to be available in the second round. And I knew that the teams who were picking ahead of the Raiders in the second round were not going to go after a quarterback because they either A, already went after a quarterback, or B, didn't need one. And so I remember sitting there going, the Raiders, they better not mess this up. They better get him. And sure enough, round 2, Derek Carr, drafted by, at that time, the Oakland Raiders. And I was so excited. I remember the shirts here in the Fresno area. It was the Raider shield, but in the middle, instead of the Raider, it was the Fresno State Bulldog with an eye patch and the swords, and on top it said Raiders. And on the back of the shirt, which I still have in my closet, had the number 4 and Carr above it. And I remember what that meant for the community, because if you're not familiar with Fresno, we're smack dab in the middle of California, and we have no professional team near us. Every professional team that is the closest is 4 hours, and that's Sacramento Kings, that's the 49ers, the Raiders, the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors. You have the Los Angeles Lakers, Rams, Chargers, Clippers. All of those teams are either way about 4 hours away. And so, the biggest brand in Fresno is Fresno State. And then the second biggest brand football wise is, well, you have the Raiders and the 49ers. And specifically where I live right now, I live in a place called Sanger, California. And there's a Raider legend that came from Sanger. His name is Tom Flores. And if you're a Raider fan, you know that name. And so there's a ton of Raider fans here in Sanger. And so that's what they meant. That's what they mean to us. All these players, all these teams. I mean, this is it, man. This is huge. And so Derek going to the Raiders, it was crazy. And I just remember, all right, now it's time for Derek Carr to show what he can do, and he should be the starter. And again, you could call it bias, but I truly believe that he should be the starter his rookie year. And was his rookie year great? No, it wasn't. But the Raiders weren't great. So we were building something. And what Derek brought to the Raiders, and I think what needs to be understood, is Derek brought stability at a position and at an organization that hadn't had stability since Rick Gannon in 2002. There was no stability. I remember the Kerry Collins. I remember the Jason Campbells. I remember Dante Culpepper at the end of his career. I remember Aaron Brooks. I remember even Andrew Walter sighting at some point. I remember Jamarcus Russell. There was a lot of instability at that position in that organization. Whether you want to admit it or not, Raider fans, that's what it was. And for 9 years, Derek Carr brought stability to that position. Were there controversies here and there? Of course there were. You're always going to have controversy when it comes to a quarterback. Always. There's always going to be a side of the fans that don't like the quarterback. There's always going to be a side of the fans that do. Unless you have an all-time great. And that's what makes him great. But what Derek Carr brought to the Raiders was bigger than just football. And I think that needs to be said. One more thing I wanted to say is I remember the Raiders building and building. In 2016, the Raiders had it. There was 2 years. There was only 2 years of the 9 years that Derek Carr was the quarterback for the Raiders that I legitimately thought the Raiders could get to a Super Bowl. I don't know if they could have won. I think if you get to a Super Bowl, you always have a chance to win. But 2 legitimate years that I really thought they could make it to a Super Bowl. And the one year was 2016, the other year was 2021. In 2016, Derek, going into Week 16 against the Indianapolis Colts, Derek went into that game, and I don't know if it's true. I'm just going off of memory. But I believe Derek was a front runner, if not in the top 3, in the MVP race. at that point in time in 2016. Amari Cooper, Khalil Mack, Michael Crabtree, Latavius Murray, Jared Cook, all names we should remember. And I remember the fight that team had and how dominant that offense was, and that defense finally was able to stop someone. It was incredible. And I'll never forget, Derek Carr steps up into the pocket, trying to scramble away from some defenders. Get a defender, dives at his legs, not a dirty play, dives at his legs, and unfortunately Derek's foot gets stuck into the grass. And he gets twisted up, and he immediately goes and grabs his leg and says it's broke. I don't know about you, and again, maybe it's my bias, but when I saw that happen, my dreams of a possibility of getting to a Super Bowl were gone. Still had hopes that the Raiders could win a playoff game. Still had that hope. Matt McGloin played pretty decently. He wasn't terrible, and I thought we had a good enough team that they could carry McGloin. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. McGloin ends up getting hurt the last game of the season, and Connor Cook, our third string quarterback, comes out, and the guy was good. He was a good third string quarterback. I think he was a good guy to have. He wasn't a turnover machine, but he wasn't anything special, and unfortunately, he was not ready for that playoff game, and we ended up losing to Brock Osweiler of the Texans. Never should have lost to him. And I remember watching that playoff game, heartbroken that we couldn't move the football. And I just remember thinking, man, if we had Derek, this game would have been over by first quarter. We would have killed it. That Texan team had no business being on the same field as us. And that's why quarterback position is important. Derek comes back after the injury and is trying to get rejuvenated. I remember that 2017 year. That was the Jack Del Rio year where he ended up getting fired at the end of the year. And you could tell that Derek was still a little hesitant. You could tell that he wasn't fully healthy. He wasn't fully confident in his leg yet. And you knew it was going to take another year. And unfortunately, you can blame it on Derek. I'm sure he won't care. But unfortunately, Jack Del Rio ends up getting fired, and people blame Derek Carr for that. I don't think that was Derek's fault. I think Jack Del Rio got fired for a reason, and he really never sniffed a head coaching job again. And so I just remember all that, and the Raiders had to rebuild, and then John Gruden came. Everyone goes, oh, John Gruden's going to get rid of Derek. No way he's going to keep him. Why would he want to keep Derek Carr? And all of a sudden, we started seeing, oh, wait, okay, oh, there's something here. There's something here. Derek's all in on John Gruden. What is that about? And the years that you could see them progress, and that team having to basically push restart and progress again, it was incredible. And I'll never forget the 2021 year. The wide receivers, the top wide receivers were CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs. And so those were the three receivers that, were the top receivers in that draft. And I remember we needed a receiver. We needed one. We had just let go of Amari Cooper, or we were basically talking about it. Amari Cooper wasn't the same anyway, and we had signed Nelson Aguilar. We need a receiver, right? And we had this kid named Darren Waller, who was kind of a no name at that point, and he had a good year, but we didn't know if he could do it again. So we needed a receiver, and we needed it bad. And I remember I said, okay, well, my number one's Jerry Jeudy. My number two would be CeeDee Lamb. And my number three would be Henry Ruggs. By the way, completely wrong. All wrong. CeeDee Lamb probably should have been the number one guy. But I would actually make the case that Henry Ruggs could have been that, if the issue didn't happen with him. But yeah, so I remember I was like, Jerry Jeudy, we got to go after Jerry Jeudy. And the Raiders get the pick. Cowboys get CeeDee Lamb already. He's gone. So it was either Jerry Jeudy or Henry Ruggs, and we go Ruggs. And I remember, all right, well, the one good thing about Ruggs is he never dropped a pass. He didn't drop a pass. Now, he didn't get as many passes as Jerry Jeudy. He wasn't the number one target. So, I don't know how to feel about that. But I just remember that, Henry Ruggs, there is potential here. And when finally Ruggs started getting into the offense, you started seeing it and you go, oh man. And I remember immediately, I think it was on the podcast too, here on Drew Code, where I told Cody, I think I was wrong about Henry Ruggs. This kid's good. This kid's really good. Not only does he have speed, and it kind of reminds me of the old Raiders of like, we're always drafting for speed, but this guy has great hands. He has great hands. And boy, he was a weapon. And I will never forget Henry Ruggs in that first season. I mean, he was incredible. Absolutely incredible. And so during that year, all of a sudden, breaking story about John Gruden, some emails are coming out that are not great. And say what you will, whether you think that the emails should have got him fired or, it wasn't even that bad of an email, whatever you feel. Listen, the fact of the matter is, they were wrong. The emails were not in tasteful, professional emails. They were not. Shouldn't have been sent, but they were. And so they end up having to let go of John Gruden, and they put in Rich Bisaccia as the head coach. And I remember feeling, oh, this offense, man, the offense was great under Gruden. I mean, he was great. And so I just remember just going, man, I don't know what the offense is going to do, but we have the same guys. So it's got to be pretty similar. And offense kind of sputtered here and there a little bit under Bisaccia, but overall it was about the same. And so thank God, because we were still winning games. We were in a playoff potential spot. And so I just remember the game against the Jets and Derek Carr stepping up into the pocket and his famous off of one foot running forward, and I thought he overthrew Henry Ruggs, and out of nowhere this kid just says, oh, I got to turn on the Jets a little bit more, and he starts turning them on, catches the football over his shoulder, and marches in the end zone. I believe he was not touched. And I just remember, like, dude, this kid's legit. And then after that, the car incident happened, where unfortunately ended up killing a young woman and I believe her dog who were in the car. And devastating. Absolutely devastating. And so he ends up going to jail. And so now the Raiders don't have, at that time, I believe he was their number 2 receiver. They don't have their guy. He opened up the offense for the Raiders. And even after that, the Raiders were still finding ways to win. Was it pretty? No, it wasn't great. But boy, they found ways. And so the Raiders then get into the playoffs. We have to face the Cincinnati Bengals. And this Bengals team is good. They got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. They got T. Higgins, Joe Mixon at the time. It's good. It's good offense. Joe Burrow having an MVP season. And I just remember that I felt like we had John Gruden. We had Henry Ruggs. We can beat this team. How are we going to beat this team without those guys? We're going to have to be real physical, and we're going to have to be on point. And we had a chance. It was the fourth quarter. I don't remember the time left on the clock, but it was basically going to be our final possession. And fourth down in the red zone. We got to score a touchdown. There's no way to get a first down. We're in the red zone. We got to score. And I remember Derek trying to extend the play. And he scrambles right. And defenders are starting to make their way towards him. And he had to make a decision. I throw this football. And it could get intercepted. Or I try and run it in myself and be stopped about 5 yards short. So I think he made the right decision in throwing the football. And I implore you to go back and watch that play. Because not one single receiver created separation. Not one receiver was open in that play. Bengals played it really well. And so Derek tries to fit it in a window that was very, very tight. And he was either my guy makes a play or their guy makes a play. It's a 50-50 shot. And he throws it. Linebacker picks it off. Game over. And I remember everyone saying, why did Derek throw that football? The same Derek Carr. He can't come in clutch. Yada, yada, yada. And I just remember thinking, Derek is the leader in comebacks. You know, the amount of wins that he has coming back, being down, going into the fourth quarter, and maybe even playing in overtime, was just underneath Matthew Stafford. And we talk about Matthew Stafford as being one of the greats. And so I just remember going, you obviously don't know football, first of all. And secondly, that was the only throw he had. There's no one open. What do you want him to do? Run out of bounds? Run it in? He's not going to run it in. There was like 3 guys there. And so I just remember going, that was the right play. Whether you want to admit it or not, it was the right play. It was the only play. And it just unfortunately ended in an interception. And I just think that left a bad taste in some people's mouth. And that was 2021. And that was when the real wheels started turning, because now this is when Josh McDaniels comes in, and this is when it started going, all right, well, Derek Carr's got to go. Everyone blamed Derek Carr. And they let go of Derek Carr. They signed Jimmy Garoppolo. And Garoppolo threw the most interceptions he ever had in his career. More interceptions than Derek ever did. And what's funny is Garoppolo missed a few games being injured. And then people were starting to go, oh, maybe this was Josh McDaniels' issue, not Derek Carr. And it was like, the damage is done. You gave him the ammunition to let go of Derek. Is Derek Carr an all-time great? Is he a Hall of Famer? No, he's not a Hall of Famer. I will be the first to admit that. Even though I'm a very biased person, and if it were up to me, would I put him in? Absolutely. Because what he did for the Raiders organization, you cannot just put just football stats and that's it. But that's not what the Hall of Fame is. The Hall of Fame is, did you change the game? Did you change the organization? And were you just a beast every single year? He didn't change the game, but he did change the organization, and his numbers were always really good. And so I will admit, I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's not going to be a Hall of Famer. He didn't win he only got 4 Pro Bowls. He didn't win a Super Bowl. Now, is he an all-time legend? Is he going to be in the Ring of Honor? Is he going to be in the Raiders Hall of Fame? 100% he should. Creating stability in a position in an organization that never had stability since 2002 is huge. Bringing the Raiders back to the playoffs since 2002, that's huge. Going through however many head coaches, I don't even want to count, and still being a stable part of that organization is incredible. And not only that, what he did for that team. What he did for the area of Oakland, and then when he went to Vegas. He brought us that bridge from Oakland to Vegas. He was the only one who really, truly made us still believe that it was still the same Raiders. So, Derek's not a Hall of Famer, but man, what he has done for Fresno, what he has done for the Raiders organization means way more, at least to me, than him ever being in the Hall of Fame. I'm sad to see Derek retire, but I'm extremely happy for him and his family. So I wanted to come on here and have that whole discussion because Derek means a lot to me. And, I do have a dream of him one day being part of Drew Code or being on an episode. That's my dream. I would love for him to come on the podcast and just talk with us. We don't even have to talk about football. We can talk about life, whatever it is. But what he had brought to Fresno, and to not only have the expectation that David Carr kind of put on him, and him exceed that, and arguably step over that, is incredible. It is incredible. So, congratulations, Derek. I hope this gets to you. Congratulations on your retirement. Congratulations on your career. And you are forever a Raider legend. And one more thing before I go. Raiders, you need to sign him to a 1-year contract and let him retire a Raider. Because I don't think this shoulder injury was the end-all be-all. I think it was a step towards retirement. But Derek had always said, I want to be a Raider for life. I want to be a Raider for life. I don't want to play for any other team. And when Max Crosby says that, we're all happy. We're all like, yeah, 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 yeah. But when Derek said it, we were still a little torn for some weird reason. But now you know. He's not retiring because of an injury. I mean, I'm sure that's obviously part of it. I'm not saying it's not. He's retiring because he wanted to be a Raider for life. And unfortunately, someone came in and broke that up. And he wanted to prove that he could still play, that he should have stayed on. I feel like he did. But now this injury happens, and he's got to come to grips with, listen, I didn't want to play for another organization. I wanted to play, and I wanted to be a Raider. So he needs to come home and retire a Raider. That's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry for the lengthy Derek Carr stories, but I just wanted to come on here and show you what he meant to me. I'm not going to speak for Cody, but I know he had he loved Derek Carr as well, and so, man, just a huge impact that player was. So, all right, guys, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you later.